My Gavanan Melonin, and well met indeed. I'm Arche and welcome back to Age of Empires 2 Definitive Edition, as I bring you this time something a little bit different. This is a warm-up game that Kylan and I did prior to the tournament kicking off. Now, I'm not sure what I'm going to do about the tournament and the reporting of the games or the replay of them, so I didn't want to do a tournament game just yet, although one game has been played by the time I recorded this, or two games, in fact. The first round between Kylan and myself and Sheep Whisperer and Dunker Biscuit / Dunkirk has already taken place. But I didn't want to go into that just yet because I'm not sure how I'm going to cover the tournament. So I wanted to bring you something. And recently Age of Empires updated. And when Age of Empires updates, all previous replays don't work anymore. And in knowledge of that, I deleted all of my replays. And then shortly after I deleted them all, Silver in the Discord reminded us all that actually you can just you can send your game version back a notch, and then all of your replays will still work. But obviously it was too late by then. So I have none of the diplomacy games that we've played, which have been a great many. So these are the only games I've played since the update. And I wanted to do an Age of Empires game, so I thought I'd bring you this. So the difference with this is that, of course, it is not diplomacy. This is a normal team game. And we are going to go through, as it were, and just see how we get on. Now, Kylan and I are the two that you may actually know. Kylan has played a few games in the Discord, so you might recognise his name. And obviously, you should know who I am because you're watching my channel. But we're playing against two people who we just don't know. This was just a normal ranked multiplayer game in Age of Empires. So these are just total strangers. So we've got Derbotti in yellow and someone called Dodomeki in orange. Dodomeki is considerably better than Derbotti, as you will see as it goes on, but that's the only spoiler I'm going to give you. Now, to save us getting constant attack pings and things like that, I won't often change the player that we're looking at, because this isn't an in-depth analysis of a duo game. It's still just a sort of arm's reach look at the game itself. But to take you through all the people, I am playing as the Magyars. I'm in blue. Magyars are a sort of light cavalry civ, hit and run, that kind of thing. They also have the bonus to their cavalry archers, but it's not an innate bonus. It is a tech you have to research, which means as much as you might think they're a cav archer civ, they are in the very, very late game, but in the early game they're not. They don't get any bonuses to their cavalry archers really at all. So it's all in the later stages of the game that they get those. Kylan is playing as the Ethiopians, who are a renowned archer civ, and again, in the late game, they get a bonus that makes their siege very good, but until they get that bonus, their siege is really no better than anyone else's. There's no innate bonus to that, but they do get an innate bonus to their archers, which is that they fire faster. So, and it's up to you whether you think cheaper archers, longer range archers, or faster firing archers are better. That's for each man to decide. Away to the north, and perhaps bizarrely, we thought Dodomeki is playing as the Goths. The Goths don't tend to get played very much in these types of games because generally the games are decided relatively quickly, and Goths need to get quite into the later stages of the game to really make use of their benefits, which is masses and masses and masses of infantry units. But as you will see, all three of us get to the feudal age relatively quickly. But Derbotti's not there yet. He's gone heavy on farms. I didn't notice that. I, of course, didn't see anything that the enemies did. We're not talking to them. We don't know who they are. We know nothing about them. Derbotti is playing as the Vikings. Now, the Vikings do get bonuses to go into archers because they get some good economy bonuses that boost their wood collection. But generally speaking, they're an infantry civilization as well. So it's two sort of infantry civs. Well, it is two infantry civs, really, but the Vikings just get surprisingly good archers that you might not think they do, but they do. Versus an archer civ and a cav civ. Everyone's gone to feudal age relatively quickly and boosting through. Now, Dodomeki, by the looks of it, is booming. So he's, in essence, to boom, for those that may not know, as we're playing an actual game here where words mean things, if that makes sense. In diplomacy, everyone booms. But to boom is just to build no military units and try and get through the ages as quickly as possible, to try and get as much income as one can get and as many resources from as many different areas as quickly as possible. But alas, I have missed that already Kylan is moving in with archers into Derbotti's base. Derbotti's responded by training a few skirmishes, and he's kept the archers at bay. I've sent some scouts up into Dodomeki's base where we've seen the gold line, and we're going to try and hit those. Try and push those villagers off of gold, which succeeds quite nicely. But this is where I'm not particularly good in these high pressure 2v2 style games, and it will show at various points. Those of you that actually are good at this game will almost certainly pull your hair out at various points as you watch the tactics in inverted commas of myself. One such example is having most of my scouts here killed off in the attempt to try and kill only 2 villagers. But I do kill them, and then I pull the scouts out, we go back, we steal another villager. I mean, that's not a bad trade, 1 cav. But Dodomeki's already hit the castle age. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning, he's playing as the Goths, and the Goths need to get to late game to really get the most out of their units and the most benefits for them. They can't flood you with infantry until the late game. And they also ideally need their castle up, which is what he's now going for, in order to get the best benefit for them, which is that the Goths can train their Huskarl unit from the barracks. But only once they've researched that ability at a castle. So it's imperative for them to get a castle, so Dodomeki's gone for that. Dodomeki quite clearly has played Goths many times, and he knows what he's doing, and he's got a build order, and he follows it religiously. I've gone back in with my scouts, though. I've got a few more of them, but again, I'm being too wishy-washy with them, really. I'm not hitting anything. Kylin's archer horde was pushed back, but he came back with his own skirmishers, and now is meeting Derbotti's force out in the field there. Now, Derbotti's longer time to get up into the feudal age has then paid off, that he's gotten to the castle age quicker than both Kylin and myself. But Kylin is harassing Derbotti, so we'll see if it is worth it in a moment. My scouts do manage to kill a villager or 2 before the castle is built, and then I did consider just attacking the castle, because no one gets murder holes in these elite games, and often you can catch a lot of people out with that. I personally think getting murder holes is the singularly most important tech to get once you build a castle, because otherwise a single scout unit could kill your castle if you don't have any military. And obviously you would have military. It's the age-old adage, isn't it? Mobile defensive forces are better than stationary towers, but every strategy game I've ever played, I always want to build stationary towers and forget about them. But Kylin is harassing Derbotti there. He's building a watchtower to try and get some defences up. He had a couple of skirmishes, but they've gone. But back in our bases, Kylin and I, maybe not booming as much. I bought in my gold miners. Don't really know why, because I only had 2 of them. My resource management leaves a little to be desired. Whereas if you note, Kylin has considerably more villagers than I, all doing considerably more things than I. The only thing he doesn't do is he doesn't go for any stone, whereas I've got a few on stone, but he's got way more villagers than me. This game was a big lesson for me in always prioritizing food first, because food equals villagers and villagers equal resources. But it should always, I feel like you should almost play with a system, once your build order has kind of reached the end, you should almost play with a system where every other villager goes on food, regardless of what the other one does. So 1 stone, 1 food, 1 wood, 1 food, 1 gold, 1 food, and repeat the cycle, or placing them wherever you need them. But Kylin's army is pushed back. He can't do anything against a tower with archers and skirmishers. That'll kill him before he can kill it. So Derbotti buys himself a little bit of a reprieve. My scouts were all killed off a long time ago by villagers and spearmen. And Dodomeki is now looking to boom further with a couple of town centres at the back. Kylin now the only one still in the feudal, and I've hit castle age, but I'm not doing anything with it because, as aforementioned, my skill leaves a little to be desired. Kylin bringing his archer horde back, but a brief moment of downtime, as it were. We'll speed through the downtime. Eventually, I do get enough resources to put down things that I actually need. I'm only just building a market, for example, so I'm only just seeing what Kylin can see. Kylin is being hit with crossbowmen and skirmishers. He's only got archers and spears. Not spears, sorry, skirmishers as well. I always think of them as spears because they carry a large javelin, spear-like javelin. So I always think of them as spears, but they're not really, are they? And Dodomeki just booming, as I say. 2 town centres up quickly, more villagers. He's just going more villagers, more villagers, more villagers. I'm not harassing him. And as you'll note from the score, I am soundly in 4th place at the moment. Finally moving on to build another town centre. And Kylin then hits the castle age, and where you will then probably see a flurry of activity. He's using the towers, and this walling strategy, I must confess that prior to these games, these tournament games and these warm-up games, I genuinely thought that actually walling yourself in completely was just not considered the way. I thought that was a noob tactic that people would laugh at you for, because walls are very easily broken down. But actually it would seem, that's a keen indication of how little I know, it would seem that walling yourself off from raids is the way to play. So doing this, where all your buildings form a wall, and either plugging the gap with troops or plugging the gap with further walls, is absolutely the way to go. And bear that in mind, because it becomes pertinent a little later on. I finally get a second town centre up. Kylin's horde moves out to try and find Der Botties. Oh, Der Botti moves with a very advanced town centre there. But the two hordes just miss each other. But Der Botti's moving in, but of course Kylin has the hill as an advantage. And, sorry, I don't want it to sound like one of those damned game narrators that make it sound like the world's about to end when something crazy happens in game. I absolutely loathe how over the top they get with narration. And I'm never going to be an elite narrator or anything. You're not going to see me at the next Red Bull Wallalol or anything like that. But I just cannot stand how excited they seem to get when a trebuchet takes down a castle when it's like at 1% left to build or something like. Yeah, it's an impactful event, but come on, guys, come on, let's do it with a let's have some decorum about ourselves. But the two archer hordes meet one another, trading blows, moving away. Very much the meta for troop command. They are microing, as it is called in the gaming world. Although Kylin's actually just tanking the hits as he's moving in. I think he's trying to go in and hit the economy and ignore the army, because if he'll kill the army because he outnumbers it, but he might not trade very well for it. But Kylin then actually stopping and turning around. It seems like he was just trying to funnel the enemy, and so he's got the first few troops for free, meaning that he takes far less losses and overall takes a much better win. Der Botti responding with some siege, though. The classic anti-archer counter, because archers don't do wonderfully well against siege, because they have to get within range of each other to shoot one another. So you do tend to see onagers and mangonels counter archer hordes. And Der Botti moves his mangonel in. But Kylin has seen it and moves the troops away. Oh, and then a lovely little split there. But as you can see, it takes 3 volleys from all of those units to bring down that mangonel. But that was a nice little split and a solid blow to Der Botti there. He's taken the mangonel, the cost. Dodemeki, meanwhile, still just booming up. He's going to send some Huskarls south, which will completely counter Kylin's Ethiopian archer push, because Huskarls, of course, are basically immune to arrow damage with their 6 armor piercing. 6 ranged melee. Ranged armor, sorry. Pierce armor. It's called Pierce armor. I do know. I have played this game for many, many hours, but in the heat of the moment, you forget. I am only just starting to get with the idea of actually walling in. I've got a castle on the hill. I've got some cavalry archers, but as I mentioned earlier, my cavalry archers aren't actually any good until I give them a second bonus. I haven't even got a third town centre up at this point. It's all going a little poorly. Kylin's got 3 town centres and he's finally booming out onto stone, and his army runs into the Huskarls and he tries to flee because there's nothing he could do against those Huskarls. They will make very, very short work of his army, so he tries to pull out. I send some knights over to assist. Let's speed up, see if we can get there to save him. And he desperately runs his archers in. Knights counter Huskarls in the same way that Huskarls counter archers. The knights are nowhere near as good against the Huskarls as the latter is against archers. But they are an excellent trade. You'll know I lose a single knight against that Huskarl battalion, and then I stick my archers with him. Dodemeki is probing me with a scout on my northern border. Very disappointing indeed. And Kylin sends his archers over. Now, at this point, where we maybe lose a little wayward, we should probably focus on one or the other of the enemy. Kylin's archers then just start roaming around in the base there. And Botti's army moves to the front line but doesn't do anything. Kylin then seemingly doesn't... just allows his archers to die. I'm not really sure why he doesn't stop to kill the pikes. But Dodemeki getting a few Huskarls, and that's more than enough. 1 or 2, maybe 3 tops, probably would have killed that whole horde. He's still scouting out around my base. I'm trying to get some knights up, and I've got some troops in the castle. I'm going in full knights. Now, knights are a good counter to the Goths, of course, but the Goths can train units quicker than anyone else, so they can get their halberdier and pikes out very quickly, which then, of course, counter the knights. So it's very difficult to take down a Goth player once they really get going. You need, generally speaking, a lot of siege, or you need champions. Champions pretty much completely counter the Goths. They have very little answer to a champion push, because the Huskarl counters archers and the halberdier counters cavalry, and the Huskarl and the halberdier are their best units in many ways. They can only hope to come back at that with champions of their own. But generally, Goth players always go into Huskarls, and they're not usually ready for champions. And speaking of that, I just need to double check. Do they even get them? Yes, they do. Of course they do. I thought they did, but I thought, well, better just double check. Kylin bringing his forces back to deal with the mangonels, splitting his forces again, meaning he takes no damage and takes down 2 mangonels. Lovely. He's converted all of that stone into a castle in the gap in his base. And I've sent some more knights in to assist so that we can take out... Because, again, the knights counter those skirmishes, no trouble. But all the time, we're still just letting the goth player boom. We are, in essence, in many ways here, we're signing our own death certificate. Which is folly. But we shall see. We shall see. I'm not giving anything away. And I'm not giving anything away by telling you that either. I still don't have a third town centre. Oh no, I finally do at the back there. We're starting to get farms up. I'm just gathering resources, but I'm still behind, considerably so. Oh no, Deboti, I'm just ahead of Deboti because my military has managed to do successfully. I've lost very little as yet. I've not been raided, I've not been attacked, and my military has done well. And it is then, at this time, we pool our forces. Kylan hits the Imperial age before anyone else. He's ready to go. And we pool our two armies together because now Deboti can't hope to counter both of us. If he trains halbs, Kylan's archers will get them. And if he trains skirmishers, my knights will get them. So we start hitting him. And unbeknownst to us, the Huskarl and Pike army is moving in from the Goth lands. But we keep going. Just attacking what we can, really. Just taking down anything nearby. Kylan's putting a forward castle right on the hill. University going down. And we move in. Villagers can always run into town centres, and at this point the troops are still not fully upgraded, although I've got as many upgrades as I can get at the moment. But the army of the Goths arrives, and a little... Because they're all grouped up like this, I actually have the excellent counters for this. My knights would deal with the Huskarls quite nicely, and my cav archers would deal with the pikes very easily. But within all of this movement and all of this left and right, it's very difficult to click on the pikes. And I take a fair amount of losses with the knights for it. But also the Huskarls are now... they've got bonuses as well. They do 11 attack. Now, obviously, the knights do 12 and do have 4 melee armor, whereas the Huskarls at this point only have 1 melee armor. So the knights are just better than the Huskarls. There's no two ways about it. They're about twice as good, almost, other than the attack damage. They have more than twice the defense, and they have twice the health, but they have a similar attack. But then Kylan, because he's in the Imperial Age, starts trebbing the enemy down. Deboti's in a really tight spot now. A very, very tight spot indeed. I continue to send some troops over to assist, trying to just pool our forces and attack this. If we can take out Deboti, then no matter how much Dodormeki can boom, he stands alone. And a player alone, with all the resources in the world, is going to run out of gold eventually. He needs Deboti alive in order to trade, because trade is vital in these long team games. But with Kylan's forward castle, it's not looking too good for Deboti. Does Deboti mean something? Am I constantly swearing in German and I don't know it? If you do know, do let me know if Botti means anything, as I just have no idea. I then do something which is perhaps a little foolish, in that I think, well, Dodormeki's not been doing anything for a while. Let's push a castle right up to his border. I'm starting to get more farms, but I'm just woefully behind in farms. Well, not really, though. I mean, if you counted up all of those farms, it's very similar to the farming that I've got there. But Dodormeki's got a lot more farms. His horde of Huskarls move in, and I was really hoping that they might not see me because they walk past for a long time before they actually stop and come back. And I thought, oh, he's not noticed, and then he does. Now, we get the castle up, but as aforementioned, Huskarls just tank arrow damage. So, even though the castle is killing them in just under 1 volley, they're doing a lot of damage to it. And it's no use. I get my Magyar Hussar comes out, but because of the rally point system, it just dies. And it's at this point that I say, Kylan, you're going to have to deal with Deboti on your own. I'm off. But by this point, Kylan's really got Deboti by the throat. He's got a real stranglehold on him. But the sheer number of Huskarls that the Goth player can output just bring the castle down, and it becomes something of a waste, I'm afraid. The villagers are all expunged, and they all get killed off. The great death of the villagers. Still only at 3 town centres at the moment, but I've got a bit of a wall up. I even put a gate in. I like a gate. But Kylan is now really tightening the noose on Deboti. He's got all this land behind him that's safe, and he's lost his primary town centre, and he's only got 1 other. So there I am saying I'm bad on town centres. Deboti's only got 2, and one of them's been destroyed. But a Mango Noel moves in, and Kylin does not move his Arbalists out of the way, and that is a big hit. Very successful Mangonel throw there. Mangonel shot, I should say. Dodemeki then starts to think what should he do with his Huskarls, and finally decides that perhaps I've overstayed my welcome. I desperately try and build a second castle to support the first. Kylin just keeps up his assault on the outer lines of Derboti's base. Derboti sends a few crossbows over to that corner, but his crossbows are no match for the Ethiopian Arbalester. The Arbalester fires faster as standard. So this is what I'm talking about. The innate bonuses are the ones at the top that just affect everyone. So if we just have a look at the Ethiopians, you'll note straight away their archers fire 18% faster. Whereas I mentioned that their siege units are only better once you get a tech, and that's in the unique tech, the torsion engines. So if you were to build your siege engine but never get torsion engines, you've just got a standard siege engine. You're getting no benefit over anyone else. But the Ethiopian archer is better than the Viking archer immediately because it fires faster than it as standard. So those are the innate bonuses I mentioned. I finally make it to the Imperial Age as well, and it's now only Derboti who's not there. He's fled a town centre away into Dodomeki's base so that he's got protection there. Kylin's forces are slowly being whittled down. I'm not entirely sure why. I think because of the archers at the back taking his attention. I think that's what does him out. Oh, and then his crossbows get killed off by bears. Oh, only one. He lost a crossbowman to a bear. Who does that? Dodemeki sends in the Huskarls into Kylin's base because, of course, at the moment, Huskarls deal completely with Kylin's entire army. And they buy Derboti enough time to go up to the Imperial Age. They are now up to elite Huskarls, and Kylin, then starts training into two-handed swordmen. I already mentioned that swordmen are a good counter to Huskarls, but two-handed swordmen that don't have any upgrades, well, they've got one upgrade, not so much. And they're no match for an elite Huskarl with all the upgrades, which I believe they have. He's got some more in his base. Let's just double check. I know he's got pikes, but they'd tell us anyway. Up to 2. Oh, and he's got them up to halberdiers now. So my cavalry helps counter the Huskarls. So Dodemeki then switches into halberdiers and sends them forward instead. A bit all or nothing, though. It's either all Huskarls or all halberdiers. And we already know that Kylin's got a very good archer force, and archers totally counter halberdiers. My knights are upgraded to cavaliers, and the Magyar Hussar, still just the Hussar, not the elite version yet. I'm training troops where I can. Our farming starts to grow a little bit more. We killed off those archers that were there. Still only with the 3 town centres, though. I really feel like I should be up to more than that now. And then maybe, I don't know, maybe if you haven't got the food production to support training out of 3 town centres or 4 town centres, then it's not worth it. But then we start putting the pressure back on Derboti, and I think, oh, those houses probably will be a nuisance if he loses them. So I'm just hit that southern line of houses, and it also gives Kylin another way into the base away from the castle. It's always annoying to lose houses in the late stages of the game, particularly when you're not expecting it. And you try and then train a reflex defensive force and nothing happens. But Dodemeki bought him more than enough time to get back into the game. And our armies meet. My cavalry charges in. I almost completely forget about it. But I do manage to pull them out before the halbs get to me. Trying desperately to get back to that hill where the siege and the archers wait. And we succeed in doing that. But then foolishly forget about the cavalry and get a fair number of them killed because I forgot to just run them away fully. We then bump into some of Derboti's archers, which would mean we lose a few more. The castle then takes down 1 or 2, and it's just a slaughter. I lose all of those cavalry. At this point, Dodemeki then starts hitting him with his halberdiers, but as you will note, he then starts attacking me. He finally decides that actually putting me out of the game might be the best course of action than constantly running his army south to help Derboti. And by this point, I just like saying Derboti. Derboti finally is back in enough. Kylin is now taking the top spot with a number of units that he's killed. Dodemeki a good 1,000 ahead of me in score. Now, score is not, of course, the be-all and end-all, and score does not mean that one player is out-schooling another, but it's a very good indication as to how far forward or behind one player may be over another player. Now, we have elite Huskarls going up against only Cavaliers. I've got upgrades on my units. My Magyar Hussar is now elite, but the Huskarl is a solid infantry unit. And the Hussar's not really a very good counter to it. I've obviously got my cavalry archers supporting and boosting and helping. And I think by this point I have researched my unique cavalry tech, which gives my cavalry archers 1 extra damage and 1 extra range. Send them into the castle so that they can fire. They can help without the risk of dying. But this is a large amount of Hussars, and I don't have any troops in my base. Kylin cannot assist me either, of course, because Kylin has exclusively an army of archers. So even if he managed to get them over to my base, they would do nothing against these Hussars. It is on me and my knights and my hussars to try and hold back. What little group of and what little force I had does pull back from Derbotti's base. And with the 2 castles as well, remember the castles don't do wonderfully well against the Hussars, but they do very well against the halberdiers, and they do damage the Hussars, so it's not terrible, but you'll note now the damage is very, very minor compared to what we saw earlier. The elite Hussar has 10 pierce armor. My castle does, at the moment, 15 damage with 6 arrows, but they don't all do 15 damage, but the primary arrow does 15, and with their pierce armor of 10, they are taking hardly any damage per volley. It's a flat subtraction, sorry. So if my castle shot 1 arrow that did 15 damage, and the Hussar had 10 pierce armor, then it would take 5 damage instead of... it could take 60 or whatever. The additional arrows from the castle, that's where I'd need to turn to Spirit of the Law, I'm afraid. I don't know if the additional castle arrows all do the same high damage, or if they do slightly less, and I think they do slightly less. But castles are very powerful. But Dodemeki then realises it's a race against time. Can he beat me before Kylin can beat Derbotti? Now, in terms of score, Derbotti is really, really low, having even half of my score, and I'm being soundly pushed back. The Hussars flood into my base. I have absolutely no counter to them at this point. I've got a couple of cavaliers here, there, and everywhere, but it's costing me greatly. And if we just swap to see the absolute shambolic array that my resources are in, disgraceful is what it is. I have 80 villagers, and I have 82 pop. Oh no, there we go. My 2 military are dead. And my villagers start getting killed off as well. I've got hardly any gold. Plenty of wood, plenty of food, and a little bit of stone, but barely any gold. If we were to check on Dodemeki, he's got hardly any of those things because he's constantly spamming them out. And I should imagine Kylin would be the same. Oh no, Kylin is sitting on an absolute bounty of resources. That's insane. And Derbotti has, absolutely nothing. He's got 4 gold and no one actually mining gold. So for Derbotti, it's very much, can my ally beat my enemy before my enemy beats me? And I use the amount of wood that I have to try and desperate to train some stables, and then it's the realization, no, what we need are champions. At this point in time, I don't even have them upgraded to men-at-arms. They would be just militia if I got them out now, and they would die immediately. Kylin sends some troops over to assist. That helps separate Dodemeki's forces, but my villagers have been massacred. I tried to flee those that I could, and many of them are now out here building the barracks. I've managed to upgrade to long swordsmen, and we're training as many as we can, just trying to keep them away from the enemy line. Keep them away from the enemy for as long as you can. And then they're going in. But at the moment, they are a poor matchup against the Hussars, but they're very good against the halberdiers. And just like that, they're up to 2-handed swords. We're holding on. If there's one thing I'm good at, it's ratting out to the very end and making my enemy pay for every single inch of ground they try and take from me. And it's no different here. The 2-handed swordsmen then start killing off a few, but mostly they're dying because they're being outnumbered over and over and over again. But we found the clincher. And who would have thought? Magyar 2-handed swordsman. I then decide to get a little bit ballsy, and I go back to build a town centre in the same spot as the first one. Despite the back of my base being gutted, many of my villagers being routed or killed, and the few that remain are now dangerously close to the enemy army. More 2-handed swordsmen are coming out, as Kylin now really does just mop up. Kylin is even harvesting the resources from Derbotti's base, and has his own archery ranges on the edge of it. So Derbotti's base is gone. His base is now in Dodemeki's base, and he has to rely on that and that alone. But similarly, my base is overrun with enemy forces at the moment. Many of my villagers have been killed, and many more are on their way out. Dodemeki's base has not been raided as yet. His farms grow wildly. He's got a lot of villagers on farms and food. Farms and wood, sorry. But he puts a market down because he realizes that now or never with the trade, they need to get trade going because the gold has run out. The last gold deposit, I think, is in fact this one here that that Kylin is harvesting. Or is mining. I'm going to go with harvesting, why not? But Kylin's harvesting from Derboti's base. Dodomeki then really starts to put the pressure on me. My northern line's cut off, the mills are destroyed, the farms are gutted, all of my buildings there are destroyed. But the trick with multiplayer, and this would be my biggest tip to you, whether it's a Diplo game, whether it's a multiplayer game like this, is do not resign until you really, really are out. And by that I mean you've got 5 villagers left and you run into a corner or something. Then you're probably gone. But if you've still got resources, a large chunk of your base is still intact, and it's not fully over yet, don't resign. Many another player might have resigned already faced with what came. I've lost most of my villagers. If we do just swap back to me, because I'm really up against it. I'm down to only 28 villagers. And 10 of them on food, 9 on wood, and 9 on gold. We're not bothering with stone anymore, and we're going all in on two-handed swordsmen. Many other player would have resigned by now, but no, you keep going, keep going, keep going. Kylin is doing really well. He's completely gutted Derboti's base. So Derboti is doing poorly. There's no two ways about it. And Kylin and Dodomeki are now equal in score. It's who can defeat what will happen when those two come up against one another. Now, as Ethiopians, actually, with torsion engines, Kylin may stand a good chance against Dodomeki because his siege is very good. And siege onagers are a good counter against goth spam. But both of them need gold. If it comes down to a trash fight, then the Goths will probably win because of how quickly they can train their units. They can spam halberdiers far faster than Kylin ever can. But we finally managed to clear Dodomeki out of our base. Not all of our villagers are killed, and we get a town centre that's left alone there and one in the north. Dodomeki then moves in on the northern one, and I try and pull the villagers out. But Dodomeki's got his eyes elsewhere as well because he came down to hit Kylin. He couldn't afford to allow Kylin to grow too strong into the gap created by Derboti, so he's forced his troops to head south, thus distracting him and giving me a brief amount of time, a brief respite to kill off what was in the middle. I'm trying to run my villagers as far away as we can because the northern land is lost. But the castle will do all right against the Haubs. And halberdiers do terribly against buildings. So all those halberdiers will die unless he gets some Huskarls up to support. They'll never get the castle before they're killed off. As you can see, they're all going down quite nicely. No real trouble there. He abandons the villagers when he bumps into the cavalry and two-handed swordman brigade. So I get the villagers to get onto the farming, and we set up another farm down in the south with the absolutely lovely spin wheel design for the farms. Can heavily recommend. We've got plenty of villagers to keep us going down here, and I'm also going to try and sneak off and steal some of Kylin's gold, which I just realised he still has some of. Kylin also moving into trade. We're going to have a much longer trade route across the southern side of the map. But we are behind on the trade. But that's not too much of an issue because Dodomeki and Derboti's trade isn't very good. 13 gold per trip he's getting there with that trade cart. Not particularly wonderful at all. And you'll see how many halberdiers he's spamming. Absolutely crazy on the halberdiers. Here's a halberdier horde at the moment trying to take down that castle. It's only halfway. We've killed so many halbs. But he can just train so many more. All this line of barracks. What's the plural of barracks? Barracks eye. But I'm finally up to champions. Magyar champions. Who would have thought it? Magyar's famously a cavalry nation. We get paladins. We get elite Magyar Hussar. We get excellent cavalry archers. But we also get champions. And champions are unexpected. And champions will do wonders. But the reason, if you're wondering why Dodomeki probably hasn't gone into champions himself to come and just counter me, is because champions are countered by archers. So if we get a sniff or an inkling that Dodomeki's going to get champions himself to come and deal with us, then Kylin will move his archer army north, and Dodomeki will lose everything. But a champion, for example, my champion at the moment has 17 attack with 3 melee armor and 70 health. An elite Huskal has 16 attacks, so 1 less, 2 melee armor, which is again 1 less, and I didn't see the health there before he died because I was reading them in turn. Anyone see the health? Train another Huskal. I want to compare the health. Yeah, so I've got 1 more attack, I've got 1 more melee armor, and I'm fairly certain I've got 5 more HP, but we won't be able to see until he trains another Huskal. Oh dear. This is the professionalism that you always come to expect when you get a video from Marke Galadir. It wouldn't be a Gallo video if I knew everything off the top of my head. Kylan has managed to wall up his base. He's still pushing in with his two-handed swordmen, which is as far as the Ethiopians go. Let me just double-check that before you all shout at me. Yes, they do not get champion. They pay... They're good archers and good siege. They have to pay somewhere, and champions are the way. But the champions that I had... Champions obviously counter halberdiers wonderfully, but not when they are absolutely swamped by them, and the Goths do swamping with villagers very, very well, and he does that again. But all of this is buying me time, using some of the farms that we already had down, just popping mills in their place, remilling at the back here, archery ranges, stables, we're building up, we're rebuilding. I'm not out of this thing yet. If I can help Kylan in any way, I'm going to bloody well do it. Even if Dodemeki tires himself eating the very flesh of my corpse, even in death, I will still serve. And Kylan will get a boost. If Dodemeki just constantly focuses on me, Kylan can continue to push out Derboti and make sure he doesn't do what I'm doing. And unlike me, Derboti isn't putting up a fight. So whereas I was training two-handed swords, I was doing what I can, I was pushing back. Derboti seemed more interested in just ensuring he could run away and resettle. So you'll note that Derboti's contribution now is a town centre there with farms and wood, and a town centre there with farms and wood. He's got 3 halberdiers. But Dodemeki now finds the rest of my base. He moves in to start harvesting that last gold that I had on my northern side. He starts taking down the barracks. It's not going well, but I note that his army is exclusively halberdier now, and I think a while ago trained my unique tech that boosted my cav archers. So we start trying to get a few cav archers, because golden wood is something that we have got. Also, going to try and see what we can do about maybe a little bit of a raid in the back of their base, because at this point I'm thinking gold is now really scarce. The Huskarl is the big threat at the moment, the big fear. Oh, they have 70 HP, by the way, so they're the same as the champion. So my champion is in all aspects better than a Huskarl in a 1v1. The Huskarl just shines if an archer starts shooting at it, whereas a champion does not, unless you're playing... Well, I don't know, actually. Do they get champion? Sorry, we spent almost more time in this one, haven't we? The Malians. You get champion. Oh, yeah, they do. Oh, that's interesting. Because they get an extra pierce armor per age. They get 3 extra pierce armor by the end as Malians. I didn't know if they got champions to benefit from that, but they do. Madness. Madness, I tell you. The Helbs start taking down the final barracks. Helbs aren't very good at taking out buildings, I've said that already, but when you've got a horde of them, they're good at anything. But what they're not very good at is taking cavalry fire. Because when they start moving on me, all we then need to do is simply run away. However, it's only successful to a point, and then when there's that many of them, it can become a trifle difficult. Cavalry archers aren't as good as this at Mangadai because they have a delay before they shoot, which is very annoying. But what I try to do is herd the halberdiers toward the town centre, so that the town centre can assist in the kill. He then goes for the, I think, incredibly misguided decision of thinking the halberdiers are going to do any real serious damage to the town centre. And they do some damage, but he loses the entire halberdier horde. And it's just not, from my point of view, it just wouldn't have mattered if we'd lost that town centre. But then I start repairing it. He realises that maybe all hope is lost, goes back on the villagers, and as soon as I can, I put them back in the town centre. I might have already mentioned, if there's one thing I am good at, it's fighting to the absolute bloody last. We shall fight them on the beaches. Damn bloody right, sir. Right, we saved the town centre. Horde of cavalry archers. So if he comes with a horde of halbs, we're ready for them. We're prepared and ready. Kylan has now completely gutted Derboti's southern base, but his archer horde bumps into the Huskarls and is absolutely no match, as already mentioned. The Arbalest are doing a single point of damage per shot there, as you might have noticed. Oh, which means you need 70 to kill a single Huskarl in a volley. That's just insane. Huskarls. I hate Huskarls. As with a great many people that have played Age of Empires 2 over the years, many of us started our journey with the Britons. Because I actually am British, and generally speaking in any game that has Britons in, I always play as them first. We live in a very American-centric world, and it's very rare for Britain to usually be in a game. So when they are, I always play as them first. I'm sure you're probably all the same with your own countries. Britons are absolutely countered by Goths. It is a horrible hellscape and nightmare to play against the Goths as the Britons. Obviously, the elite players will now be laughing and saying, oh, but you can do this, you can do that, you can do this. But on paper, and for 90% of the player base, Goths are a Britain's worst nightmare. And so we're all very familiar with the Huskarl, and we all hate it a great deal. But Dodomeki's focus being away to the west means he loses entire forward wood line there. Kylin's base now extends across much of the map. He's put up to a stone wall. People build stone walls. It's crazy, isn't it? I never would have thought people build walls in multiplayer games. This is only like my 5th multiplayer game ever that isn't a Diplo. So it's just crazy to me that people actually do that. My base is still not doing too well, but I've got a castle up. I'm still just holding on. I'm then going with another pro tip from Galu is castles can only be attacked by as many units can fit around them, and by reducing the number of units that can fit around them, they last longer. So I build houses around the base to make them last even longer. All the tricks in the book that make me terrible in higher level play, but an absolute nightmare to fight in lower level play. So Kylin's now got a bit of an issue, though, because we're now right up against Dodomeki, and Dodomeki, as I've already mentioned, counters Kylin completely. Dodomeki then sends his horde back in against me. I've got some skirmishes, because skirmishes also do well against halberdiers, terribly against Huskarls. But I was hoping to build them as the flak for then the cavalry archers to not take any losses to the halberdiers. But Dodomeki has bled Huskarls in amongst that list, in amongst those hordes again. So I suffer massively there because I selected all the cavalry archers at once, and they tried to run across and group up with the ones in the north, which meant we lost a lot more than we needed to. But my castle plan works wonders. My cavalry archers all flood into the castle so that it starts shooting more arrows, and it then takes down a fair amount. Dodomeki then starts again tiring himself out on my base. While this is going on, Kylin is flooding into Dodomeki's base. Derbotti sending a few arbalesters to help. He's back in the game with some military units, those coming from up here in the north. But Kylin knocking on the door, but realising that he needs the support of his arbalesters to deal with those halbs, but he does it. This turns Dodomeki's focus back to his own base and allows me then, you can see that he's just tasked his army to attack me and he's not controlling it anymore. So we're able to sort of kite it around the castle to get as many kills as we can. It's like a merry-go-round of death. Come and see the merry-go-round of death. Diddly diddly dee. And most of Dodomeki's army moving in on me there goes down. We managed to hold on again. Galu's top tip number 3. If the enemy is focusing on your units and not on your stationary defensive building, kite those units around that building for all you're worth, sir. Kite, 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 kite. Kite like you're watching Mary Poppins. Let's go fly a kite. It's a bit of a niche reference, but hopefully some of you got it. Kylin sending in some siege rams now to try and... I'm not really sure why. Oh, to bring down the enemy base, I suppose. Because he doesn't need them to act as like arrow defense. That's something you often see siege rams used for, is you put them... If an enemy has gone heavily into archers and you're not playing as the Goths, you send in the siege rams first, and then the enemy archers focus on the rams, and then they act as like arrow barricades. Or what are those things called? Like arrow shields? You've seen them if you've played any sort of siege-based medieval game ever, where they just build big shields out of... in Japan, they use bamboo all threaded together. In medieval Europe, they'd use like sort of boards, wouldn't they? Or hay, often... do I mean hay? Yeah, I think they do mean hay, don't they? Like tightly bound hay packed together. You know what I mean. Siege rams act like that. But Dodomeki then pushes down into Kylin, noting Kylin is now right up outside his walls. Kylin's military has ballooned. My base has been beaten back to almost nothing. I'm still going with the same bad matchups, though. But and I'm down to my last town centre, that one we had saved earlier. I've got a few houses in the north keeping me going. But Kylin floods out some two-handed swordmen to try and deal with Dodomeki's force. And again, it's just another battle of attrition. We've seen many times throughout this. Derbotti trying to assist with archers, but he loses all but one. And Dodomeki just coming again and again with the halberdiers. Halberdiers, halberdiers, halberdiers. How many halberdiers does it take to kill Kylin? We shall see. Stay tuned. Something needs to change, and the time is now. The barracks lines go down. Dodemeki finally pushes back Kylin's army, but Kylin has the defense of the wall to fall back on. Dodemeki cannot get into Kylin's base without going through mine, which works in our favour quite nicely. And he holds him there. He's got hordes of Huskarls. He's got hordes of Halberdiers. Kylin's two-handed swords do not match up to Huskarls. So we compare those. Elite Huskarls do 16 damage, 2 melee armor, 70 health. Two-handed swords, 16 damage, 4 melee armor, and 60 health. But alas, that is not enough. Now, it probably would be enough if they were like for like, 1 for 1, but Kylin's constantly trailing in melee unit numbers because he's focusing on archers, not on two-handed swords. So it is in my base that we must form the response. And it is now that that response is built. While Dodemeki and Derbotti are busy tiring themselves on the front lines of Kylin's base, as I'll speed it up because it's just a lot of back and forth. They completely clear out all of that. All of those barracks go down. Oh, he just sent all those Huskars to deal with that. But it is at that point that my Magyar Hussars then seize on an opportunity to flood into their trade line. Always got to watch for a raid. We hit the absolute jackpot, and hundreds, not hundreds, I'm doing myself. It's like when the victor writes this battle from history, doesn't it? Thousands of trade carts are cut down by my glorious Magyar Hussar charge. But no, in practice maybe 20, 25. But in essence, all of the trade cards, really. Only about 8 or so make it out alive. They're not going to be getting gold anytime soon. Dodemeki has to respond, and he does so with light cavalry. Light cavalry against Magyar Hussars is not a matchup you want to really be playing with. The Hussar completely counters them. But I'm here for the trade, so I move the army off. Dodemeki pushes right up then to the wall. Kylin's walls are now the focus. All of Kylin's northern base has gone down. We are really up against it here. Derbotti has gotten back into the game. Arbalesters supporting Huskarls. Good mix against the Ethiopians. A very, very good mix. But amassing in my base is a horde of champions. And the Hussars have just done what needs to be done. They then start taking down the farmers of our enemy. I had hoped to take that town centre, and I would have got it too if it weren't for those meddling kids. The halberdiers coming in at the end. They're just pushing me out. So we run away from them as best we can. Turn on the lights. Cavalry, just make sure that they die. If we see a trade cart, it must go down. And then I abandon the Hussars to their death. Because they are no longer my focus. My focus now is champions. Because Dodemeki has broken into Kylin's base. Derbotti supporting him there. Kylin has no real response. He's not set up for siege at all. He's all archers. But that many Huskarls are no match for the champions. And we bring them down with very few losses, as you saw there. Derbotti wasted his archers, bizarrely, on the castle. And you'll note, Kylin does not have murder holes, so his castle can't kill those last few archers. Derbotti's sort of getting back into it. Oh, Kylin swaps to Shotel Warriors. A pretty good counter to archers, actually, because of the insane damage that they do. 22 damage. You've got to be having me on, son. But clearing Dodemeki's force, I then think, no, we'll push ourselves now. I might as well just push out from my base. I've got some Trebs to support. 2 full companies of Magyar champions. Let's go and wet our whistle on our enemy. We've got the cavalry archers there to support as well. And the first battle of the Grand Armée meets the enemy. And they go down so easily. Champions versus lesser number of halberdiers. Terrible day. Terrible day for the owner of the halberdiers. He comes in with some light cav, and they get sandwiched in the middle of all of those champions. He then tries to skirt the halberdiers round to the archers at the back, but they just take far too long to get round there. We lose a couple of cav archers, but he loses the entire halberdier horde. The cavalry as well, desperate to get to the archers, and it's not enough, and we move out. Champions taking down that outpost. By this point, the champions are fully upgraded, so they've also got arson, which means they're very good against buildings. Kylin then flooding into Shotel Warriors. Dodemeki and Derbotti. Derbotti managing to hold on, but now is the time. Can they stop what comes? We kill a little army there. We make only a small gap in the wall to make sure that we can funnel the enemy, and we meet enemy barracks lines. The Treb to move forward to make sure that we can take out the castles. We worry about the barracks later. Take down the castles first. Our champions are met by enemy Hussars. Hussars, I keep calling them that. Huskarls and Halberdiers. And we do take a fair number of losses, but then the cavalry archers move in. The Shotel Warriors storm in from the south to support. We start taking down the barracks with the Trebs. We've already done a good little deal of damage on their trade, and my champions are doing all right. We've got more champions training in the back, I should say, and many of our champions survived that. Shoto warriors are fantastic against halberdiers, although Shoto warriors are a tricky one because if they take any damage, they just go down. 50 health. They're so squishy. They're the ultimate glass cannon. 3 melee, 50 health. It's not great. 5 pierce isn't too bad, but a castle by this point is doing 15 damage over 4 arrows. We take out those early barracks, and Botti finally decides he has had enough. He well plays us, he GG's us, and Kylin agrees. Botti resigns, and shortly thereafter, so too does Dodemeki. Although he takes a little while to do it for some reason. I remember thinking that in the game, and I thought, what are you? Why don't you just resign? What are you waiting for? Like, you're clearly out. But he finally agrees, and it ends. Victory! We have victory! Yes. Oh dear, this has been 50 minutes. This was a shorter game as well. I didn't think this replay, but then this time I've watched from barely in fast speed, but. We were saved. We were saved by 2 things. Number 1, the biggest thing, 80% of the reason we were saved. Kylin is very much better than me and very good at these 2v2s, and manages to completely take Botti out of the game so early on that for much of the game, Dodemeki has to decide if he's going to attack me or he's going to attack Kylin. And secondly, I'd like to at least toot my horn a touch. The remaining 20% is my sheer dogged determination to stay alive, and that is then the deciding factor. For were it not the horde of champions at the end there, we probably wouldn't have won. Had I been better at the beginning, yes, we would have won far earlier. Beating the Goths by beating them early is generally considered the way to do it. But by just putting that grit in my teeth and saying, no, I am not resigning. I am going to fight this to the bloody last. And then doing so ensured that we did manage to come out victorious. Let's have a little look at the stats. Everyone likes to look at the stats. Dodemeki taking the military top score. Kylin on economy. Me on technology, bizarrely. It's because I research way too much stuff. Societal score of 780 for Kylin at the top, and him with the ultimate high score. At the end there, I was only 1,000 behind Dodemeki. And Botti, as you can see, really, really, really beaten out early doors. Nowhere near the types of scores that the rest of us have. In terms of kills, I killed the most at 1337, which might surprise you. But that was mostly because of that push at the end where he just sent all those halberdiers and I was just killing them for fun. That's where that claimed. And the units lost isn't necessarily the best thing because that generally means you have the smallest army. But again, owing to the size at the end, my army peaked 137, only 5 behind Dodemeki. But again, that's all at that last moment. That's all just at that last moment. He took down the most buildings by a long shot, of course. He lost the least, again, because they resigned before that really became an issue. And they converted a unit each. Economically, Dodemeki way ahead on food. Almost twice that of... Well, more than twice me, and more than twice to Botti. Only a little ahead of Kylin, but my resource numbers are just low. And again, it's just food, 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 food. Get more food. Technology, Dodo fastest to feudal and castle. I should have called him Dodo from the beginning, shouldn't I? Sorry. That's a bit disrespectful, isn't it? I don't know him. I don't know if he wants to shorten it to Dodo. He explored most of the map, but I researched 55 techs, which is what gave me the overall score. 20% of the resource value of every technology each player's researched, plus 10 points for every 1% of the map explored. There you go. It tells you what wins. It's pretty cool. Societal is castles. Kylin had the most. Relics, 2 for Todo, 2 for Kylin. And then the gold there. Villager highs. There wasn't... But I mean, Botti had 78. I had 80. I wasn't even attacked in the same way Botti was. It was a sham. Real shame. Only really coming into my own there after an hour and 30 minutes. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. It was a real lesson. Get me to the Imperial age and I might be able to survive long enough to support you, but fight in the feudal or the castle and I'm almost certainly out. There's a little top tip for all of you watching along, waiting for the tournament if you're going to face us. I'm going to get rushed in every tournament game now, I just know it. But I'm mentally more prepared for it than I was when Brasidas did it all those many years ago. Now, I haven't forgiven you, Brasidas. Your scout rush is burned into my mind and we bring it up far too often. But anyway, I do hope you've enjoyed that. I wanted to do something a little different, and this marks my 4th recording today. I wanted to record all my videos in one day, and I've done that. It's now 9:45 in the evening, but I've managed to record 4 videos. Khazad-dûm, Taurox, Divide and Conquer, and one Battle for Middle-earth episode that you won't see until something like the 20th of November, because the Battle for Middle-earth I've pre-recorded so many already. It is the 19th of October today. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope you'd like to see more Age of Empires on the channel. I will try and cover a lot of the tournament, so I just don't know how I'm going to do it. I don't, because every round, just to give you a brief info for the tournament, we're all going to play. It's a total knockout from the start, so there's no group stage, and then it's a best of 3 at each individual fight. So you don't play your opponent once, and then whoever wins that wins. Each team got to choose a home map. You play on each other's home map, and if it's 2-0, then one team has won. And if it goes to a third, then you play on hideout, and that decides it. So it will be 2-1 to someone. So each round is potentially 3 games, or possibly 2 games, but a minimum of 2. So I don't know how I want to do it, but I do want to cover some of the other games. I want to show you some of the other people that play. I don't want this to. I know it's my channel, but I want to give the proper respect and deference to them who have taken their time to help build the Discord in the way that they have, and who have contributed to this Age of Empires community in the way they have. And I want to support that by showing them off without me present. So I want to do some of the tournament games, but I appreciate a lot of you just tend to not bother watching if I'm not in it. But I'll try and think of something with the tournament to cover the games. So I want to cover obviously more than just my own, but equally I don't think I'll be able to cover them all. So I don't know what I'll do. But anyway, if you like Age of Empires, stick around, because it will continue on the channel. And certainly when Age 4 releases later on this month, that will feature on the channel, I expect, as well. But until then, have an absolutely lovely day. And Navarna den per Melunin, and farewell.